Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. My name is Manish Wadhwa. I am the founder of Humanity in Business. I'm really grateful to have you on the show today. Thank you. We've had a couple of these in the last couple of weeks, so this is, I think, the fourth in the series, and probably another four to go. Just quickly before we launch with our conversation with Kamal, Humanity in Business is really a movement, I guess, if you want to call us that, which is really focused around leadership and telling stories of great leaders as well as thought leaders, which you'll be hearing from today. We're really passionate about what does great leadership look like, and what does it take to lead through values and purpose, so leading purposefully. I'm really been passionate about humanity in business since I started it 7 years ago. My passion is really about how we can engage businesses to do more for society, but also do more for their employees, which I believe is what's truly stopping organizations from being at their best. In terms of our partners, Communiteer is a skill volunteering platform that helps corporates report against their volunteering activities, and so they're supporting us with the show today as well. So this morning is really about resilience. As you know, the COVID situation has brought up a huge issue around mental health, with, I believe, lifeline calls up by 40%, which is pretty much almost close to being another pandemic, which we're dealing with. And I'm sure Kamal will speak to that shortly. But for us, we know that resilience is really a key priority for organizations at the moment. And that's why we brought Kamal on the show to really tell us his story and tell us what he's doing in this space, but also share some tips and tactics to help you be more resilient as a leader. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Kamal on the show. Kamal, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. How are you?
Awesome. Really great. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. So I guess I just want to launch into you. I want to tell us a bit more about yourself, your story. You know how your topic is really interesting around the relationship to a monk. So I'd love to hear that story as well. But yeah,
Well,
please launch in and tell us where you're up, what you're all about, what you're doing.
sure. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to my home. In better times, you'd be here for dinner. But anyhow, my name is Kamal, not the tall, dark, handsome Kamal. I'm the short, brown Kamal. I like to say the real Kamal's a great guy, and he's much taller and more handsome than I am. So my background, I was born in India, came to Australia when I was 4 years old. I was a very dorky Indian kid. I grew up in the Blue Mountains. Didn't have any friends until I discovered rugby union. I got very good at rugby union. By the time I was 13, I was playing for the under-15s rep team. My plan was to be the first ever Indian Wallaby. That was the
Wow,
dream.
awesome.
I saw the headlines, move over Tongans, the Indians are here. That was the dream.
Brilliant.
Unfortunately, didn't happen. In Australia, you get very good at sports. You become very popular with the girls. So I went from this dorky Indian kid to this rugby girl hungry fiend. And my parents didn't know what to do with me, so they decided to send me to become a monk in India. So I was a monk for the next 7 years.
Wow.
I came back to Australia when I was 19, did an honors degree in economics, MBA, joined a company called McKinsey. I was a diplomat for a while, trade diplomat for a while, head of strategy for St. George, head of strategy for AMP Capital Investors, start up a private equity business in the IT sector and the biotech sector. So I'm the only monk I know that became a venture capitalist. It's a very small alumni group. Life was great until life went to shit. And what really emptied me out was the death of my first child. So when she passed away, my whole life turned around. It went to shit very quickly, and I almost lost everything. But the big thing I did lose was my mental capacity to control my thoughts, and which was really weird because I was a monk, and I couldn't sit still for 30 seconds because the grief was so overwhelming. Anyway, I wrote a book about it called Mental Resilience, in terms of coming out of. I went back to my monastic training to pull me out. I wrote a book. For some reason, stroke of luck, the Oprah magazine put a little blurb in their magazine about it. My book became a bestseller, so that's how my journey started into this space. But through that time, also, I discovered my calling. So I was very focused on my career, and a lot of people are. I never really thought about my calling, and so my calling is very much around kids. So I do a lot of work around kids, and I've been involved with Are You OK for a long time. for the last 10 years. So yeah, that's kind of who I am. I run now a leadership firm called Rezilium. We do a lot of work with the large companies, large banks, large tech companies. And the big thing I've noticed is that bad shit happens to good people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bad shit happens to good teams, to organizations. And what we're going through right now is sad. Like it's really sad and it's tough. And I think what resilience is about, we, we're having a global test of our resilience.
Yeah.
So that's kind of me. And a lot of people say, like, I want to share something with you, actually. A lot of people call me an expert on resilience. I beg to differ. I'm no expert, but I'm a student of resilience. And I'm a student of resilience from both the Eastern aspect of resilience and the Western aspect of resilience. And, the thinking about resilience has been around for thousands of years. Now it's kind of cool, but it's been around for a long time. From the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, to the yogis in India, they've all had a view on how do you thrive when things don't go your way. So yeah, that's my passion, and it's still very much a student. I'm amazed how much I'm always learning about resilience. Like 30 years on, and I'm still going, whoa, this is brilliant.
Yeah, right. So so you did the whole monk thing, and so how did you choose resilience as a thing versus mindfulness or the other practices to manage the mind? Was there just something which you saw that this is where we could add the most value from a resilience perspective, or was it instead of mental health or mindfulness or some other
So
practice?
yeah, look, mindfulness is great, meditation is great, and I've written a book on meditation and mindfulness, and we run programs on it. But I think that no one size fits all. So I would say for some people, meditation is like the worst thing that you could do.
Right.
It's not that it is the panacea. It is brilliant. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Maybe shooting myself in the foot here. I love it. I've written books on it. We run programs on it, but it's not for everybody. So I think it is really important to understand what suits your personality type, who you are, and that is not. Yeah. So why do I love resilience? Because I think in life bad stuff happens, and so you need to be able to bounce back from that. One thing I guarantee you, if it hasn't happened to you yet, bad things will happen. It's just
Yeah.
and what leadership is about is like anybody can lead when things are great. Woohoo, well done. But when it's tough, and not just other people, how do you lead yourself?
Yeah.
Like, can you lead yourself during a challenging time? Can you lead your relationship, your partner, your kids, your parents, your family, your friends, your team members, your organizations, your community? It's weird, right? We're going through this COVID thing, and now we're having violent protests. Like, like nobody could have scripted a worse movie script. Like seriously, like it would be, if it was happening on the TV. So yeah, that's not reasonable. That's bullshit.
Yep.
But
Yep.
so I think we're now being called to really understand. And like there are locust plagues in Africa
Yeah. In
and
India.
Pakistan and India. Like seriously, we've got a pandemic, we've got pestilence, and we've got protests. Like the three Ps. Like seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'll shut up now.
And I think also climate change, I think, is on the next one coming behind us, but that's another story. So tell us, what does it take to be resilient? What is exactly is resilience? And B, yeah, what does it take to be resilient? What are we talking about here?
Sure.
And
So,
why is it so important?
so I think, well, here's the thing. Life is very unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to go.
Correct.
From, you can have a great day, and then it can go shit like that. It's like
Yep.
you don't know. Like one car accident, one fall, one trip, it can change your life. So my belief is resilience is the ability to thrive, not just survive. Most people are just surviving. Life is too short to survive. You want to thrive, you want to live your life. You can't guarantee life's length,
Yep.
but you can have something to do about life quality. I don't know how I'm going to live. I don't know how long I'm going to live.
Yep.
I hope I live long, but yeah, that's nobody can guarantee this. What I can do is I can maintain and manage three things in my life, and this is what I believe. You've got to manage your philosophy, your psychology, and your physiology. So if you can manage those three things in your life, you're good. The problem is we're not taught this. Like I went through my whole career, even as a monk, and I was lucky I got exposed to philosophical ideas and psychology and stuff. And because I do yoga a lot, I got the physiology. But we're not taught a lot of these. How do you think? How do you manage your mind? How do you manage your emotions? How do you manage your body?
Yep.
It's kind of cool now, but I went through my career learning finance and funds management, which is cool, NPVs. I can do an internal rate of return. I can price an option on a calculator. Like I'm such a dork. But the stuff that really is important is how do I make sure I'm resilient? Living a life worth living. That's what it's about. It's about thriving. Most people are just surviving.
Yeah, I hear you.
And life is too bloody short.
It is, I agree. So what does it take? Why is it for a leader so important? Why is the resilience piece for a leader so important, particularly in this current climate?
So why is for a leader to be, this is like, how many days do you have? It's because as a leader, you have a disproportionate impact on the people around you, be it at home or be it at work. What leadership is about is not having all the answers, but being humble enough to understand that you don't have the answers and to go and get some bloody help. So I think if you look around the world, let's just start politically. There are some leaders that are listening to the science, some have no freaking idea. So leadership is about making sure that you're humble enough to go to people for help. On a personal level, resilience is about not having all the answers, to make sure that you're humble enough to go and ask people for help. There is no prize to get from the maternity ward to the crematorium by yourself. Like you don't get, woohoo, you did it by yourself, well done. No, that's not going to happen. If you go from the maternity ward to the crematorium by yourself without asking for help, you're an idiot. Sorry, no, not that bad. Yeah. But go and ask for help. And I think for leaders, and I'm going to talk about men because I'm a man. It's not about not asking for directions. We're really bad at saying, I'm feeling like crap right now. I need some assistance. Right. As a leader, you're not supposed to have all the answers, but what you are supposed to do is have the humility to go and ask for the answers. A big aspect of resilience, I think, is three things, and that's really important for all leaders. Number one is humility. Mm-hmm. Why? Because power corrupts absolutely. So it's really important for leaders to be humble. What's going to create great organizations and great societies and great communities is leaders being humble. Yep. Number two, it's authenticity. Bad shit happens to good people. We all have good days and bad days. Like, from a mental health perspective, from an emotional health perspective, we have bad days. We need to be authentic to say, hey, I'm human. I was brought up that you don't show your feelings. Men don't show your feelings. Suck it up, be a man. Like, what? Yeah. No, suck it up, and you don't have to suck it up. Go and share it with somebody. So you need to be authentic. You need to be able to take off the mask. And the number three is vulnerability. People can only help you if you show some vulnerability. Once again, people's egos, and I'll put my hand up here, like, who thought, ex-management consultant, private equity dude wouldn't be humble or vulnerable. And then something happens and whacks you on the side. So I think for leaders, it's really important to have those three elements: humility, vulnerability, and authenticity. That creates resilient leaders, number one. Mm. Number two, it creates resilient teams and organizations, but it also creates resilient countries. Look around the world right now. Those leaders that can say, I don't have all the answers, but hell, here's a scientist. They do. They're more likely to they've created much better outcomes.
Yeah, interesting. Awesome. You know what? I'm really passionate about the third one, which is vulnerability. I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but I really want to dwell on that one. But so tell me about humility. I mean, tell me, what does that look like in a business environment, like in a context of in work, when you're having two opposing views, and you have to know where does humility play a role in a meeting, for example, and you're not getting along with someone and he's stressing you out, or you have a disconnect with each other. how does humility come into play there in that kind of situation? If you know what I mean, I'm sure you've seen plenty of organizational context.
Yeah,
How do
so
you?
here's the really weird thing. As a monk, one of the things you're taught is a lot about humility. It's drummed into you. And what's interesting was I noticed my life, like, we wear, we wear white. We used to wear white. In some monastic cultures, you carry around a begging bowl. So you beg for your food. That's kind of
Yeah.
really, really a humbling experience when you have to beg for your food. And then I went into corporate life, and then I went, whoa, this is really interesting. There's so much humility around. And so I think the essence of humility in a corporate context is the concept of coachability.
Right.
Are you coachable as a leader? I'm going to share a story with you. So, for the last 17 years, I've been exploring human connection. And what I know with kids is that the more connected they feel, the more resilient they are. Yep.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that my kids and all the work that I've done with REOK and just my own and stuff like that, I've seen a lot of kids that have gone through tough times.
Yep.
The more connected they are, the more resilient they're going to be. And one thing I wanted to understand is how do I stay that connected with my kids? So since my kids have been 7 and 8 years old, I've been asking them for feedback.
Right.
I've had sit down sessions with them going, hello, how am I going as a dad? Let me ask you, Manish, did your parents do that for you? Did they sit you down and
No,
say,
are you
I want to know
kidding?
how I'm going as a dad? Or my parents never did that to me.
Right.
And for me, that's been incredibly humbling. So, my son said, I said, hey, dad, like, because I used to travel a lot. And, I used to have this work-life guilt thing. I don't know if you've heard of this
Yeah.
concept.
Yep.
Forget work-life balance. I have work-life guilt, where
Right.
I'm kind of continually being guilty about where I'm not at work, all that kind of stuff. And so I travel a lot. So I asked him, my son, that's 7 years old. So, how do you feel about dad not being around? And he said, yeah, we're good. Mum's a really good parent. Ouch. Okay. And I said, is
Brilliant.
there anything I could do better? And he said, well, Dad, there is. So what is it? He said, Dad, when we go on holidays, yeah, would you mind not taking your mobile phone with you?
No, right.
Bang.
Right.
Like, and I could have said, oh no, I've got to work and stuff like that. But what he said to me is, Dad, I'd rather you be present. Sorry, I'd rather you not be with us than not be present.
Yep.
Sorry, no, he didn't say that. He said, I'd rather you not be there than to be there and not to be there. That was his direct words.
Right.
And what he's trying to say is not being present. So let me answer your question. What does humility look like in an organizational context? It's very simple. And we do a lot of work around this is how do you create a feedback culture?
Right.
How do you create a feedback? Like I get a lot of leaders saying, "Oh, Kamal, I'm very humble. People can tell me I've an open door policy. They can tell me whatever they like." Yeah, how's that going for you? Well, I never get feedback. Like, duh.
Right.
It's not enough to ask for feedback. You have to create a culture where feedback is forthcoming. Resilient organizations that are agile to change, need to create a feedback culture. And it's quite a complex process
Well,
because there's so much hubris, unfortunately, that the organizational structure builds that you're going to be able to move away from that. I'll shut up.
yeah, no, that's brilliant. So,
Yeah.
how do you then teach that person that you just talked about, who's like he getting feedback and he thinks that enables him to be humble. So, is there a disconnect then when try to explain to him
Yeah.
what humility looks like versus feedback?
Sure. So I'm going to have to. It's a hard question to answer, but and I don't want to be cliched about it.
That's all right.
So I can't, in the next 10, 20 minutes, I can't answer that question.
Sure.
But what I can do is this.
Right.
Whenever we go into an organization or whenever I go to talk to leaders, my job is very simple.
Right.
My job is to irritate the crap out of them. So you have to be irritated. You have to be annoyed. And there has to be an avenue, or you've got to bring somebody in to annoy the. So,
Right.
we know what to do. So when I heard that statement from my son or any feedback, I get irritated. I get annoyed. And what I find is the more true it is, the more annoyed I
More
get,
annoyed
right?
I get, yeah.
So it's the ability to let people into an organization that can irritate you. It's about having somebody on your team that is contrarian, or it has recruiting somebody. So I like surrounding myself with people that don't think the same as myself. But gosh, it's hard work. It's really bloody hard work. I would prefer hanging around with people that like me and saying that I'm doing a great job. Thank you very much. But it's exhausting and tiring.
Yeah, right.
So the short answer is, how do you get them? You've got to irritate that person.
Yep.
And that's what I think a great coach, a great trainer, a great developer does, is push those uncomfortable buttons
Yeah.
in a way that is that works.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. That's really precise. Thank you. I love the fact irritating, and this happens to me on multiple occasions with some people I typically try to avoid, but I have to work sometimes with them, and I can feel myself, and but I just have to accept that. And it's easier to go and try to find somebody I like, but that doesn't going to work for my work. So it's a great learning process to actually understand what it is about that person that's irritating me, so that I can then be able to manage better and lead better, because otherwise I'll just keep running away from irritating people, and that doesn't grow me as a person. So thank you. Authenticity, again, another interesting one. It's authenticity, and I want to share this from a viewer perspective, and my question as well around, how much authenticity is good? Can you just, what is that fine line between being authentic? And I think I asked this the other day as well, is telling it like it is and just freaking everybody out, and then not saying as it is. And I think this is where the authentic leadership is the challenge, right? The balance between saying it. So how do you manage that?
So we do a lot of work in an area around emotional resilience, around, and the big thing there is, number one, I think what you're asking me is it okay to share emotions? And how do you share? I think that's what you're asking. I'm not sure.
No, how do you be authentic? I mean, what does authenticity really look like?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll tell you. This is my version of it. I could be completely wrong.
Sure.
But this is my version of it. Number one, I'll have to say, is that I was not an authentic person. I'm not naturally an authentic person because I've had the authenticity drummed right out of me. Like, first of all, on the rugby pitch, you don't cry when you get hurt, even though you want to, or you don't, you don't go, oh my God, I didn't make the team, I'm so upset. You don't. And then as I grew through my life, men are not supposed to cry or get upset or show their emotions. So I lived most of my life being unauthentic, and I'll create a distinction for you. The distinction between honesty and authenticity, and the fundamental difference.
That's a good comparison.
So my dad was the most authentic person I have ever met. Sorry, the most honest person I've ever met in my whole world. He would never tell a lie. If he owed something or something wasn't right, he would set it right straight away. He was very, very honest. But his relationship with me may not have been that authentic. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So I'd ask, this after he retired, he was a doctor, did very well. I said, hey, Dad, how are you feeling? Oh, things are great. I went for a walk this morning, had a great breakfast, lovely lunch. And I'm going for another walk again. And, it's really good. And I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Went to see a movie. I said, great, fantastic. I'd ask my mom, so how's Dad going? He's a bit sad. He doesn't have, he's really missing his work. So honesty is about logic. Authenticity is about emotion. And they're very different things. So on that point, what authenticity is about making sure you can share your emotions in a digestible way. I'll repeat that. Can you share your emotions in a digestible way? It's no use shoving your emotions down somebody's throat, because they can't digest it. So authentic, say for example, I was upset at my 10-year-old versus my 17-year-old, that's a very different interaction of level of authenticity. Or even you're stressed out right now about, face like my business has been impacted dramatically by COVID. I don't want to say, well, yeah, I'm jumping off, it was fantastic. That's bullshit. And people smell bullshit, by the way, too.
Yep.
So, time and time again, I see leaders bullshitting, and everybody's got well-established bullshit meters. So, it's really making sure that you can express your authenticity in a digestible way. If you're expressing your emotions and the other person can't digest it, it's not their fault. It's you've got to have some emotional mastery to make sure that you can.
Yeah, right. So what you're saying is that you got to know what they're able to take as in from a emotion, like you're saying, dump. I love the analogy, the word of not dumping it on them. But how do you know how much can you dump?
Very simple. Start off slow, then go up. you know, if it's I would start at a low level and then start to progress, because if people can't digest your emotions, it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's so you won't know a priori. You won't know before the event. You have
Yeah,
to kind of test it
deal
and
with it.
see.
And do you have any good examples of what that, of any leaders or that done authenticity or in a situation that called for it, where it was quite impressive as to how they handled something?
Yeah, sure. Look, there's so many. There's so many. I'm going to give two. One is Bob Hawke. Okay, actually, I'll give you three, and from different ends of the spectrum. I remember when Bob Hawke, when the Chinese students, and he cried. I thought that was impressive.
Right.
That was like I think it was the first time we actually saw a Australian leader cry about something, and that was just absolutely that was real. And then I think he was talking about his kids. He cried. I think that's powerful.
Yeah.
Number two is when John Howard was talking about stopping guns, and he said that he wore a vest to one of the meetings. I think that was huge amounts of authenticity to let people know that he was actually scared about going.
Right.
And he recovered from that. And I'm giving you two ends of the spectrum. And look, let's face it, like every single leadership program I'm running right now, Jacinda Ardern comes up. When she hugged um, the one of the relatives of the victims at the massacre, that was huge amounts of authenticity.
Yep.
Um, but you need to be powerful to show authenticity. If you're feeling weak and depleted, i.e., not resilient, it's very hard to show authenticity. It's much easier to hold up the mask.
Interesting. So something like a hug, which was, I think it was authentic as well. A lot of my people might perceive that as, oh, she's just doing it to show. There was no emotion there per se. It was just a hug. So is that count? As in the action itself, is that the doing could count as authenticity? But
Well, I think so. I think so.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I think the, what I felt, the way I interpreted that act
yeah,
was a sincere emotion coming out.
yeah, correct.
It's a very natural condition when somebody's crying to hug. Obviously, get permission before you hug somebody. I want to put that out there dramatically. Really, really important.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
uh,
thought that was a very emotional response. When it's just such a human instinct when somebody's suffering that you reach out with your hand or you give them a hug with permission. Yeah.
correct. Yeah, love it. Absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more. And then moving to the third thing, this is my favorite one, but on vulnerability. So explain to me, what does that look like in a corporate context? Because I know a lot of people are curious around what does that look like? How does a leader be vulnerable and yet still remain strong and in control?
Ah, so here's the thing. I think we confuse the ability of being vulnerable versus showing vulnerability. They're two different things.
Okay.
Being vulnerable, you have to build up your resilience. You have to go deep and try to understand if you're feeling vulnerable at the moment. But expressing vulnerability is two different things. So let me, and whenever we do work, we talk about a concept called powerful vulnerability. Let me explain it to you in this way. So when my kids were 3 years old, I love them punching me. Like they're coming up and they're hitting me everywhere. I go, oh, okay, that's great. It's like a massage. It's great. So I felt powerful
Right.
and to show vulnerability. Yes. Yeah. So I opened up myself and go, yeah, come and hit me. Go, this is brilliant. I was feeling very powerful compared to them.
Right.
Now my son is 17 years old. He's taller than me. Not that he does, but if he comes up to punch me, I'd be, ducking for cover and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In that moment, I don't feel powerful, so I can't show vulnerability. What I'm doing is I'm kind of, you know, um, so it's a big ask to ask somebody to be vulnerable. It's a very big ask for leaders to be vulnerable. It's a tough gig
Yeah.
unless they feel powerful. So powerful, vulnerability is what we're looking for. And the only way you can do that is building up your resilience so that you can deal with. So the word vulnerability comes from the word to wound. The word wound and vulnerability are related, right? So the word vulnerability means I give you the ability to wound me.
Right.
So when you show vulnerability, people are going to hurt you. Like that's it.
Right.
That's why people don't show vulnerability. But you have to have the resilience to be able to bounce back.
Right. So is there an example you can share again in the corporate context? What does that look like?
Oh yeah, so many times.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing it right now. I do a lot of work in startup land and venture capital still. And it is um, almost certain that any startup is going to have some dark times. It's definitely certain. The leaders that I find, and I've written an article on this actually. I'm happy to send it out. But
Yeah.
what I find in startups is if the leaders of those organizations, but this is true in large corporates and large organizations, if the leaders can show, hey, this is the real situation, this is what's happening. You know, we wanted to get the second or third round of institutional money and we didn't get it, or the product is taking significantly longer and your jobs might be at risk. Yep.
Yeah.
That's showing vulnerability, because what happens is your great product manager, your great programmer might say, I'm out. What I find, it's not all the time, but the majority of times I've noticed is that people really respect that you're showing vulnerability to yourself and the business. And they're more likely to stay with you during the tough times rather than bullshitting.
Right.
Because, and that takes a lot of courage. I've seen it both ways. So I've seen it time and time again with, especially in startup land or, new ventures, but in corporates as well. I think we've seen a lot of people during this time saying, look, you might have to take a 20% pay cut.
Right.
That's yeah, rather we can get rid of a fifth of the workforce, or everybody can take a 20% pay cut. What do you want to do? So that's yeah, that would be
Interesting.
vulnerability.
Any other examples come to mind? Because I'm really curious to really drive this point in around vulnerability, particularly when you're dealing with, team members who you're struggling with, there's some ego conflicts that are happening in the office. Is like, how do you manage vulnerability in that situation where you might be seen as, oh, you're backing down or not strong enough to handle this guy who's always getting on to me, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. There are so many. It's kind of hard, but let me pick a couple if I could.
Sure.
Um, I'm gonna pick a corporate one and then yeah. So one of the leaders of a very top tier firm came out saying that they were suffering from some mental health challenges. That took a lot of guts.
Yeah. Wow.
But what it did is it allowed people to then show vulnerability. So what I find is if the leader shows this much vulnerability, the people then within the organization that will be the cap.
Right.
The more the leader can, if he or she can show more vulnerability, the people will step in underneath that. If the person is showing this much vulnerability, then there's not going to be that gap. So I would say that was pretty intense.
No.
But time and time again, I've seen leaders saying, there have been situations in my life where things have gone wrong, and I thought I had the skills to deal with it, but I didn't.
Wow.
And therefore, I had to go and reassess who I was. So, in the same way, like I was talking about my story, that really made me feel vulnerable. And even now, it's like the independent events. Like if you're a statistician, they're independent events. Bad things happen to you now doesn't mean that bad things won't happen to you again. Like they're independent, so they can.
Right.
So yeah, you have to be able to build resilience to that. And look, even being in the resilience space, I have to share that I've had lots of challenges, like everybody has. Um, it, that it takes that intensity, it takes that humility to go and say, oh wow, another challenge, so now I need more skills. Like I
Yeah.
thought I'd done this.
Yeah.
Figure this out. No, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, really just being, again, to come back to the authenticity piece, saying it as it is and what you're going through, which I think I've noticed in my own experiences, the more I drop my own ego, so to speak, and be vulnerable, then it drops, like you said, the other person as well, and kind of shifts the energy in the room, and the conversation becomes on an equal level. So, but
Sure.
it does take courage.
I'll share one thing with you on that. My belief is that you can't drop your ego
Yeah,
because
gotcha.
your ego defines who you are. So, no, I get like, but one of like the East and the West philosophy talks a little about the id, the super id. I don't think we need to drop our ego. I think we need to use our ego for the right things rather than negative things. And don't get me wrong, I've been so bloody like one of my managers at McKinsey told me, "Oh, Kamal, you're a bit intellectually arrogant." Ow, it's true, hurt like all hell, but it was true. And I think, oh
Right.
yeah, again, seriously. So
Yeah.
it comes up and up and again. So how do you start to sublimate it or use it for good rather than evil? Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
like I
agree.
think Gandhi was an incredibly egotistical person. Mother Teresa was a very egotistical person because they believed in themselves. And you think about this: Gandhi, went on a hunger strike and thought, "Okay, now you will stop fighting." That's pretty good. Anyway, that's another
That's
tangent.
true. Awesome. That's really awesome. Love the feedback. The feedback there. So in terms of actually maintaining the resilience and building it, what does it take to truly build that? What are the practices that we need to do to actually help us build our resilience over time? I know you just can't flick a switch and suddenly be vulnerable one day, or authentic, or humble.
Yeah.
But so what's the doing involved?
Sure. Okay. Big thing, big question. So my belief is that resilience and connection are very much interrelated.
All right.
So to build resilience, you need to be number one, you need to connect to yourself. A lot of
Yeah.
people are very disconnected to themselves. You look at people, they kind of, they're in their heads, they're thinking about what they should be doing all the time. I've got this voice in my head that doesn't shut up. So you need to be able to connect. You need to be able to connect to yourself through meditation, through mindfulness, through whatever. I'm a skateboarder, so I
Oh yeah.
meditate, but also skateboard. I love
Cool.
skateboarding.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
uh, I'm not a surfer. I'm scared of sharks. Just putting it out there.
Fair enough.
The next one is connecting to other people. Like, Are You Okay is a big believer in, the connection. And I'm a big fan of Are You Okay is we need to connect.
Yep.
So you need to connect to other people. There is no prize from getting to the maternity ward, to the crematorium by yourself.
Yeah. Correct.
Sorry.
Correct.
So you need to connect to other people. You need to have those relationships. You need to have deep, strong relationships. We're doing a lot of work around kids now, both on a charity basis, helping kids build up connections. The next one is connection to purpose. you
Mm.
know, what is your life all about? Do you have a purpose in life? It sounds grandiose, but I think uh, we're very addicted to our careers. We don't think about our calling that much. And
Mm.
lastly, it's really important, but connected to nature, connected to the ecology. One thing about I was watching Adam Good on TV last night on iView. There's a great documentary about him. And he went back to the land to reconnect.
Yep.
And I love it that the indigenous model is we don't own the land owns us. And that creates a lot of resilience. So, connection to self, connection to the people that you care about and people that are really important, connection to purpose, and lastly, connection to the environment. There's not nature in us. We are part of nature,
Yeah. Agreed.
and we lose that. So yeah.
So
And once again, big topic.
what is the purpose piece? Explain that. I mean, you're in a business environment. You got make in a bank or whatever the organization is, which is got to do your job. How do you encourage people to connect to a sense of purpose there? Because it's a bit harder when you're juggling numbers all day.
Sure, we're going really deep, aren't we? Really, really deep.
That's right. That's right.
I feel like we need, maybe some port or some talk about existential crises. Look, I'm going to defer on this one because somebody that really changed my life was Viktor Frankl and his work
Mm.
around logos therapy and man's search for meaning.
Yep.
I think if you work in a bank, if you work in a telecommunications company, if you work in a tech company, you work in a hospital, that's much more relevant. But the reason I don't think you need to go to work in a not-for-profit in Africa to find your purpose.
Yeah.
I think you can find your purpose every single day. Um, but it requires deep introspection. The problem is that we don't have the space and time for this deep introspection. You have to look within. Most of my life as a management consultant or in funds management or in finance is look at the market, look at what the market needs and provide that. That's the kind of model. This model is fundamentally different. The model of finding your purpose is looking deep within ourselves first. And that takes time, energy, and effort. There are unfortunately no hacks. Like I love people who go to like a 7 day, session in, some retreat, and they go, "Oh, I'm self-enlightened." No, you're not. There are people that spend 25 years looking deeply inside themselves, and they're still students.
Yeah.
So I think, and I'm being a bit funny here, but yeah, that's my view on the.
So when you're saying I'm curious because it took me a while to find my own purpose with humanity and business is only how many ever years that was. So I guess from a business perspective, do you find it in people? Do you find it in your tasks? So what is I know it's a big piece purpose. It's a whole conversation on its own. But in a quick synopsis, like if I'm working in a thing like you're doing, I'm a fund manager or whatever am I, where do I find that? Is it just how I treat people? Is it, what is the simple way, I guess, which I could not necessarily find my purpose, but maybe live more purposefully as
Yeah, big question. And I think what Viktor Frankl would say, and once again, I'm not the expert on this space.
Sure.
I think I've had my own journey to trying to figure out my purpose, but for me, it was triggered by a very a dark event in my life, and I'm hoping that I don't think we need to all go through that.
Sure.
It is a catalyst for many people. For me, I think the purpose is. It's and I'm not being, I don't want to be cliched about this.
Yeah.
But the purpose is not for you to build shareholder wealth.
Right.
The reason why corporations were given the term corporation, so we as a society gave corporations the ability to take on to corporeal, which means make something that is fake into something that's real and have rights as a human being, was to do good for society. So my belief is that the question you need to ask yourself is, what is it that you do that creates a good in society? I like to take an ecological perspective. So if you look at an ecology, be it a rainforest, be a like the Great Barrier Reef, like a coral reef, every organism is adding to the ecology. If one organism is taking out more than it's supposed to, it's called a virus. No, it's called a parasite. You don't want to be a parasite. Your purpose has got to be feeding to the ecology. It's got to be generating and supporting that ecology.
Brilliant. No, that's spot on. Thank you. So in terms of moving to the other piece around resilience, around how to make better decisions and get more clarity, and I think that's the thing which I sometimes struggle with myself is, you're tossing up between decisions, this one or that one. And what is the role of resilience in decision making, for example?
Sure. I would focus on mental resilience.
Yes.
So on decision making, so my belief is that we make a lot of decisions based on the clutter in our mind rather than the clarity.
Right.
Sometimes the dumbest thing you think of doing is when you have to make a decision is chill, meditate, contemplate for a while before you make a decision. If you don't, though, what happens is you start to make a decision based on the clutter rather than your values and your purpose. So it's about having the courage to do absolutely nothing, think absolutely nothing, and clear your mind before you make that decision. So that's my view, and that's the mental resilience piece. And once again, I'm biased, ex-monk, written a book on meditation. So, go and get some independent advice if you want. This is not personalized advice. This is general and it's not. Yeah, my background's finance. So, you've got to be able to make sure that you take that ability to step back, go, all right, maybe I try and think about nothing. What we do though is go, over and over and over that decision, and we start to get depleted and exhausted, and we're making our decision based on depletion and exhaustion rather than real purposeful, values-driven decisions.
Yeah, I
And we've
mean,
all done that. It's like, you open the fridge and you eat something that you're not supposed to, and you go, oh, I was actually feeling a bit tired, feeling a bit exhausted, rather than, oh, yeah, I'm actually supposed to be valuing my body right now.
yeah, correct. As
I
I
just
just
did that last night.
brings me back to a point which I mentioned in my earlier podcast or rather on our video, was around how Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn, takes 1 hour of his diary and does nothing. And he literally
Yeah,
sits, closes the door, and he just has a clear diary and doesn't do anything, which is the time for creating that space to make decisions, right? I think it's such an important
totally.
piece. So in terms of actually building on that, so how would you, I guess, from a professional perspective, are there any practical tools that you would basically recommend to build that resilience?
You already mentioned it. I think, if you're not meditating a little bit every day, you're a bit of a doofus.
Yeah,
But,
yeah,
it doesn't cost you anything.
yeah,
It's there. You just need to sit for 5 minutes and just, focus on your breath. Like, wow, that's like, you can buy apps and stuff like that. It doesn't get much more simple than that.
that's true.
Stop and be present, and then make a decision rather than running here, running there, and then, let me try and make this decision on the fly. I think the big thing though is the biggest thing is to understand when your mind is feeling cluttered. Have the awareness to understand that there's a lot of noise out there, and you've got to still that noise to make a decision.
Yeah, I hear you. So really, it's almost that space is a given for resilience. Without it, you can't create it.
Yep.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. If there are any questions, guys, feel free to drop a chat. I'm more than happy to take your questions as they come through. So in terms of, I guess, from your perspective, where you see in business currently, there's a gap around resilience. What are people either not doing enough of? Is that creating that space? Is that the issue?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So here's the belief. My belief is that people don't understand how stressed they are. So the research shows that between 60 to 90% of all visits to doctors in the United States are due to stress-related illnesses.
Right.
So I think that, this little sucker here, my little phone here, if you can see the little phone, we are not designed to live with these. We are not designed to work with these. We are the first generation to go through our working lives with these little suckers.
Yeah.
So we need a different skill set. So I've forgotten the question now. But
In terms of corporate, what is the challenge in corporate currently? Yeah, is it?
Yeah, look, I think it is stress. It's just, it is just, once upon a time when we left our work, people couldn't contact us. Like, have you ever seen those phones with those, like, you have to go like this? I was doing a presentation for one of my speeches, and my son came over and said, "Hey, Dad, what's that?" "That's a phone." He said, "Really?" "Yeah, yeah, it's a phone." So
Yeah.
that was the era of work-life separation. You could actually separate work and life.
Wow.
What's happened, I think, with people is people still think that you can try and balance work and life. You can't. It's
Yeah.
gone. You can't externally. You got to do it internally, because this is with me every single moment of the day. I can work whenever I want, wherever I want, and people do. So it's the mental discipline to say, I'm not going to hold this. I'm
Yeah.
not going to check this, because it's become habitual.
And so coming back to where we are at in terms of COVID, mental health challenges have gone up by 40% as Lifelines predict, as mentioned. What do we need to do then to be more resilient during isolation and and
Great question. Great
deal with the
question. So
current
here's the
scenario?
deal. It's called social distance. It's called social distancing. Fundamentally wrong. It's not social distancing. It's spatial distancing.
Yeah,
You can
physical.
still be
Yeah.
social even though you don't connect. And let's go back to the three words that we started with: humility, authenticity, and vulnerability. If you want to be connected with people, the biggest thing, and I'm going to do a sales pitch for Are You Okay?
Sure.
Are You Okay is a charity that doesn't ask for money. We don't have people asking. All we ask is a very simple thing: go and reach out to people. Go and make sure that I rang a friend today who hadn't spoken to for a long time. I could get vulnerable. I can get, yeah, life's a bit shit at the moment sometimes, every now and then.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm used to traveling a lot. And I used to complain about it, but now I realize I actually like the discipline of getting up, going, catching a plane,
Yeah.
going to the Qantas Club or whatever, and then, doing a session here and a session there. It gave me some stuff. I'm missing that.
Yeah.
Um, I'll share with you, I'm missing the adrenaline of presenting to large audiences. You get
Sure.
this huge buzz, or running workshops. Um, so for me to show vulnerability gave him permission to show vulnerability.
Right.
So yeah, it's number one with COVID. We don't know how long this is going to go. We don't know how deep this is going to go. We don't know if there's a second or third wave. We have no idea at the moment. We hope it's going away. We're lucky with Australia, with where we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, if there's one thing I leave your listeners with and your viewers with, it is not social distancing. It's spatial distancing. Become more social if you want. Call up people, connect with them, have a deep conversation with them.
Yeah,
It's not rocket science.
Right. And I think that's exactly it. It's almost making a proactive effort to connect with people because you are isolated. So it's reaching out intentionally rather than just, by the way, hope he calls, or leaving it for somebody else to action. It's almost, I got to make an effort to do that.
Yeah, totally.
So in terms of, I guess, almost out of time, but moving into, now that there's office spaces are not going to be happening much, or less so, and we're moving from isolation eventually back to work. Have you seen any, I guess, different ways that people are working in their businesses currently? And are they more? Do you feel that are they less resilient, or is the isolation thing impacted businesses that are working currently in terms of their teams? How is that?
Totally. Number one, I think people have become much like mental well-being, mental resilience was things that people didn't talk about before. I think now we're talking about them much more. So that's great, brilliant, fantastic. If I break my leg, it's not uncool to say I break my leg, I'm in lots of pain. But it's kind of uncool to say I'm having a bit of a challenge right now, with this loneliness piece, So I think it's becoming much more, from a cultural perspective, I think that's cool. That's a good idea. Number two, I know a lot of companies who really resisted working from home, or they paid lip service to it. Like people always had to have meetings.
Yeah.
I think there's a real, we can do this. This is not rocket science. We've got the technology. Yeah. Why don't we take, a third of the cars out of, going to workplaces? That'd be cool. Or, getting the strain off the public transport system. That's not a bad idea. Maybe Wednesdays is work at home day and everybody, I don't know, that's, or we have two teams. Anyway, I think, Einstein said a mind once expanded can't go back to its natural state. I think what we've discovered now is that, we can do this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's keep on doing it. There's got to be some benefits around this. And so those organizations and people, I think in one way have been given permission to try this stuff.
Yeah, awesome, great. And I think the fact that you're actually saying a lot of people are comfortable talking about it, because everybody's in the same boat. So because everybody is in the same boat, it becomes easier conversation to have versus previously it was only a few people who were struggling with maybe mental health or resilience, and we were trying to find ways to support them. Versus now, it's a much bigger subset, and therefore more people are impacted. Therefore, the conversations become more mainstream, and therefore it's probably more easier to be more vulnerable to say I'm not feeling too great being by myself. So,
yeah,
does that make sense? Is that what you've seen? Yeah.
Totally. And look, I think it's like a spectrum, and I think we've got to be much more comfortable with the spectrum. You can get a head cold, you can get a flu, you can get pneumonia. There's a spectrum there of illness, right? So I think we just need to be more comfortable in talking about the different types. What we also do know is there are a whole bunch of, preemptive things that you can take and do, so you don't get a cold, so you don't get the flu, so you don't get pneumonia. You've got to look after your mental immune system. How do you look after your mental immune system? What does mental immunity look like in this always on my phone? So what does mental immunity look like? That's my explanation.
And the other thing before we go, we haven't touched really on the the physical aspect of resilience, is that part of the thing as well in terms of, we got emotional, we touched on mental,
Sure.
physical resilience come into play in this in terms of diet and
Oh,
stuff?
most definitely. Most definitely. So we talk about physiology, psychology, and physiology, the three things. But here's the deal, right? People know that you should, if you get a plate of chips and you get a plate of salad, which one should you eat? The salad, sitting on the couch versus, going for a walk, what should you do?
Yeah, I got it. Pretty
We know
straightforward.
that we should do that. Like, that's not rocket science for anybody. What you need to get right is your psychology and the philosophy, right? So then you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So just checking in if there's any more questions that we need to cover. Looks like not. I think we touched pretty much on every of them. If you have any information, Kamal, please flick it across to us. We can share it with the others. But I think we can probably end on that note. And thank you so much.
If you want to link up on me on LinkedIn, I'm
Yes.
Kamal Sarma. That's on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, that's fine. We post a lot of stuff around this stuff as well. So if you want to hit me up, that'd be cool.
Awesome. Well, listen, really, thank you so much for your time, man. You've been a legend, and I love your story. It's awesome. And I want to probably catch up with you next time when we have more time to really dig deep in some of the stuff you put there. So
lovely. I think a lot of people are going to do namaste now. No handshaking.
Yeah, namaste.
So namaste, everybody. Right. Be cool. Be well.
Awesome.
Speak to you soon.
All right. Take care, Kamal. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch us today. Really appreciate you giving us your hour. Hopefully, you found that really useful. If you want to reach out to Kamal, do that on our LinkedIn. It's Kamal Sarma, and you'll get that on LinkedIn. But also his company is called Rezilium, and you can look that up on Google as well for more information. Thanks again, and look forward to welcoming you back again next week for our next series. In the meantime, have an awesome day, and stay safe and be resilient. Take care. Thank you.